Hi there.
Okay.
Thanks for coming today again and tuning in to this next interview in the series for dog owners to help them discover the secrets of dog experts and transform your relationship and connection to create the bond you've always wanted. Today I have Dr. Moira. I should have checked that out. I'm not even going to try and say your last name.
That's okay.
I, I should have practiced that with you ahead of time. She's a lovely, lovely lady. She's a dog expert, right? It's graduate. She's a doctor of veterinary medicine, specializing lots for many years now in animal separation anxiety, dog separation anxiety, and animal assisted therapy she's worked with. But right now you do a lot of consulting for separation anxiety with pet owners and also teaching courses for that, for separation anxiety. What a big topic these days. Thank you so much for coming and taking your time to share some of your expertise in helping dealing with separation anxiety.
Thank you for the invitation, Jodie. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I hope I can bring some awareness and a little bit of help for all the pet parents out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Since you've got such great systems and ways of dealing with this, I'd love you just to get into it and helping where it starts with even the topic of separation anxiety with dogs.
I think that the most important thing to start with is to understand what is separation anxiety. And I have a coworker here that's going to be helping me. um, Separation anxiety is a term that is so well known or so spread out there, and but that doesn't mean that people truly understand what is separation anxiety and what it involves. And it's even more common to hear about it nowadays with the pandemic and all the COVID puppies, as we call them, dogs that have not been left alone for a while now. Either they were adopted during the pandemic, or they lived with their parents before, but they stopped being left alone during this situation. So first of all, separation anxiety, we basically can define it as the panic of being left alone. Okay, that's in simple words. So basically, a dog who suffers from this disorder finds being left alone aversive. It's an aversive stimulus for him. And that means that when he or she is left home alone, he will really try to cope with it. But there's going to be a point that the dog is going to reach where the situation is going to become aversive for him. And that point, we'll call it threshold. From that point on, the dog is not going to be able to cope with the situation anymore until that stimulus is removed. In other words, until the absence is done and until someone comes back. And instead, the signs of distress are going to escalate over time. Okay. And there are many signs that the dog who suffers from separation anxiety can display. There's not a really common rule. So it's not that because your dog barks and destroys things, it means that that dog suffers from separation anxiety. There can be many different combinations. But all of those signs that the dog displays are basically triggered by an underlying fear and anxiety. And that is the root of the problem. And that's what we have to observe to make sure if a dog suffers from this or not. And now, the other big concept that is very common to hear out there are separation related behaviors. And separation related behaviors are all the behaviors that a dog can display when left home alone that can be undesirable for the humans or for the dog or for both. But these separation related behaviors can be many. So separation anxiety is included within those, right? But also there can be a lot of other things that could be triggering behaviors that are undesirable, such as destroying of objects, such as vocalizations, eliminating in the house, that are necessarily triggered by distress, by being in distress. For example, let's say you live in a crowded area and your dog sees other dogs through the window every time that they pass by, and your dog barks at them. But then when the other dog is gone, your dog stops. Or let's say your dog is bored because it's left alone for so many hours during the day, and so your dog starts chewing on things because he needs to use that energy or channel that energy in some ways. that doesn't mean that that dog suffers from separation anxiety. So it's very important to tell the difference and being able to understand what is your dog suffering from, so you can help him overcome it, or you can address the problem in the right way, because not all of those situations are going to be addressed and approached in the same way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have somebody wanting to, oh, he's my buddy. Yeah, it's it's so much more like we were discussing that that it gets labeled so quickly, and sometimes it's something so totally different. And I'm sure a lot of them are not nearly what people think they are. They don't think it's not nearly the big issue. They have to just learn their dog and learn the situation and what's really happening.
Exactly. And the problem with it is that what usually happens is that, let's say you leave your dog alone for the first time, and your neighbor tells you when you come back home, like at night, that your dog was barking the whole day. And so you instantly think that your dog must be suffering from separation anxiety. And you start with that term when you seek for help, which is okay, but you think that you have to treat your dog for that particular issue. But it is impossible to tell for sure. It could be that your dog is suffering from separation anxiety, but it's hard to tell for sure if you don't observe the dog's body language. And that's when assessing the dog while alone becomes so important. So my biggest advice to people out there is usually to assess their dog if they are not sure of what's going on. If something is happening that it's making them to feel a little bit worried about leaving their dogs alone, set up a camera. You can have even Zoom, like, and
Oh
sadly,
yeah.
everybody learned, but it's the bright side of the pandemic. Everybody learned how to use Zoom. So you can easily set up your computer pointing out towards the door. You can connect your phone to the meeting and just go out, leave the area for a few minutes and see what your dog does. And if you see that the signs that your dog is displaying seem to be paired with distress, or with a body language that suggests distress, and on the other hand, you see that these signs escalate over time instead of your dog just settling after a few minutes and relaxing and taking a nap, it will mean that maybe your dog is suffering from this disorder. You might not be sure, and you will definitely have to seek for help, but this at least will clarify a little bit of what is going on. It will give you a little idea if maybe what's happening, it's not due to separation anxiety after all.
What a great idea, the Zoom. Oh, I never thought of that. Yeah. I actually use Zoom for a number of things now. I hadn't have thought of that.
Yeah, it's very easy. And even if you are not tech savvy, it's totally fine as well. Everybody has these things nowadays, right? So you can just grab your phone and leave it recording somewhere where you can kind of point out the door or the place that you leave from. And you just leave without your phone for 10 minutes. You come back and then you watch the recording, and then you make sure if anything is
That's a
happening.
good, yeah.
A lot of
Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say that the other typical example is, you come back home and the house is a mess and everything got completely destroyed. And you think that your dog is, doing it because he's in distress. And it might be, definitely. But it could be also that is due to something else. There's a ton of fun videos out there that show dogs having the blast while alone, destroying on different objects. So you have to tell the difference to be able to address it correctly.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But I was going to, right away, even when you mentioned before about the barking, I mean, that's a common thing, right? People hear that their dog's been barking and they think that's what it is. And quite easily, my first thought is maybe the dog's not tired enough. Like, there's just so many things, right? It's actually fully understanding what, if it hasn't had enough activity. Because I know just recently, somebody was saying that they videoed and they thought their dog was having a hard time. And sure enough, the dog just laid down. Right. And it just was like, so
Exactly.
it
You can
wasn't,
get surprises.
yeah. So it would be really
Yeah,
encouraging to film your dog and actually see what's really
definitely.
going on.
Definitely. And as I mentioned before, what you want to look is if your dog has the tools to cope with the situation. So even though your dog might be, like might bark at something that he heard, or even a dog who never was left alone before may be adapting to be alone. I have seen many of those cases lately because of COVID, right? So people are starting to leave their dogs alone. And if you see that dog, if you record that dog, you will see some level of distress at the beginning of the absence because they're figuring it out. But you will see that after a few minutes, they are able to cope with it, to handle it, and they fully settle. So the body language suggests relaxation. And that tells you that the difference between separation anxiety dogs and dogs who don't suffer from this disorder is the ability to cope, is having the tools needed to deal with this stress or with that level of stress, and and settle after they have dealt with it. Separation anxiety dogs don't have that capability, and that's what we try to teach them when we jump into a training program.
Yeah. And it takes time when it's real, when there is a real separation anxiety problem, depending how bad, it takes time. That's all. Right?
It definitely takes time. It definitely takes time. And that's something important to consider to set the expectations, right? Because what's happening is that a lot of people are coming back to work right now, right? Or soon, in-person work, before, like after being working from home for quite a while. And they in their mind, they set up a timeline. So I need to come back to work, let's say in 2 more months. So I need to solve the situation before I come back to work. And the problem with that is that separation anxiety is an emotional disorder. It's like we would experience a phobia. And so we can't really set timelines for that. It's not like teaching a dog to sit or to lay down or to do some sort of behavior. It's something that the dog will set the pace when we start training. It's like if we were to a therapist to overcome our fear of something. We can't go to a therapist and tell the therapist, you know what, I need to overcome my fear of spiders in 3 months, because after that I have a trip to the jungle and I need not to be afraid of those spiders, right? It's not going to work like that. So it is important to understand that we will have to follow the dog's pace, and that the speed of the progress will depend on the plasticity of the dog, on the environmental factors, which could be many and could be definitely affecting the situation, and the participation of the guardians in the training. But as a general idea, because every dog is different, so we can't really tell you, okay, you will take this amount of time exactly. In general, we try to let people know to think more about in months than in weeks. So this will take months, even up like more than a year. It can take a long time, but if you are on the right track, you will keep your dog safe below that threshold we talk about at first. So comfortable and without being exposed to the situation at a level that is more intense than they can handle, and they will continue making progress over time.
Yeah, and reading your dog and learn and seeing those thresholds, those points, and working from there. It's so important. And your dog, I believe the dogs are all waiting to do it. Like they're waiting to do to they don't want to be upset when you leave, and it's very possible. There's no reason why, even if it takes time, excuse me, that it's possible, and that
it's definitely very possible.
I was just gonna say, it's such a stress for people when they worry about that.
Yeah, and most of the people, we're not saying everybody, nobody wants their dog to suffer, right? So when there is an option to move forward into a treatment and a management plan, it's always relieving, because now you know that your dog is going to be safe while you work on this and while you help your dog not being afraid anymore. One of the typical examples that we CSETs love to give are analogies about how we can about our own fears, because it's easy to understand, yeah, my dog is afraid of being left alone, but it's sometimes hard to relate to it. So one of the things that we usually use as examples are all the things that we as humans are afraid of or tend to be afraid of. There are many of those, right? Like heights, flying, planes, dark, places, small spaces, rats, snakes, spiders, you name it. And I usually give my own example because I'm afraid of moths and the big nighttime butterflies. And I know it's ridiculous
No,
because
it's
they don't
not.
do anything, they're harmless, right? But it's not logical. I can't handle it physically, I can't handle it. And that is how a dog with separation anxiety feels. So think about whatever right now, everybody who's listening, think about your worst fear, think about what really makes you uncomfortable, and for a second picture yourself exposed to that at a level that intense and that you can't handle. What first happens is that different changes start happening in your body, right? Your heart rate changes, your breathing changes, you start sweating, and your body basically prepares for an emergency, for survival. And after that, you start doing things. And those things sometimes are ridiculous, sometimes don't make any sense and don't solve the problem. You may just sit and cry, you may run away, you might start screaming, throwing things. I come from Chile and we have heard earthquakes there, a lot of them, big ones. And so there are people that have a trauma with earthquakes. I personally don't, but there are people that are very scared of them, right? And I have always seen these people that an earthquake start and they run away. And I feel like, well, but it's just not gonna stop. Like, the earthquake is not gonna stop out there. It's gonna keep going because it's happening everywhere, right? It doesn't make any sense to me, but to them it does, because they just can't cope with it. So all of those things that you do when you are in that state are involuntary. They are completely involuntary, and the dog or the human in that case is doing it just to cope with the situation. It's just an expression of that underlying fear and anxiety that you're experiencing. um, and so fixing those things, and let's say putting the dog in a crate so the dog doesn't destroy anything else, or using a bark collar, or buying a door that is like super hard and doesn't allow your dog to escape, things like that aren't going to solve the problem, are going to suppress one of those signs. But what's going to happen is that that fear and anxiety that the dog is experiencing will have to get out somehow. And sometimes the dog will find ways to get it out that are actually worse and more risky than the ones that he was doing before.
Absolutely. Oh, I've seen horrible things. I never forget, like when I worked in a boarding facility, and I mean, I saw dogs take their to pull their canines out on the metal, like and really fast, like the ones that really had a real, issue with the fact that they were put in that situation at that moment. Where it was just, it's like it's a life or death thing.
Exactly. And you can't explain someone who is in panic that it's going to be okay, right? Because at that point you're not listening. You're exposed to that situation and you don't know how, you are not thinking, you are just reacting.
It's just
So the
reaction.
only way that, exactly, right? So the only way that you can actually help is by putting that person or that dog below that threshold, below that point. So slowly you can teach them that this is okay, but at a level that they are able to handle. And so slowly they can start creating these tools to deal with the situation better. And you mentioned something before about, like we can get there, we can be successful, and we definitely can. There are a few things that can make it a little bit harder, and I think that's important to mention, just to create or set the expectations right, and for people out there to seek help if they find themselves in that situation, is that we don't know what causes separation anxiety, but we do believe that there is a genetic predisposition for it, which paired with the right environmental factors can trigger the onset of separation anxiety. Those environmental factors are usually in the line of changes, traumatizing events for the dog, but there has to be that predisposition there. The reason why we think that there is a predisposition is because there is a high correlation between different types of anxiety. So there is a high correlation between noise sensitivity, generalized anxiety, separation anxiety, even confinement issues. And so it is important to consider all of those other things when you are working with a dog with separation anxiety, because sometimes if the dog is also experiencing other problems or other disorders, such as the ones I mentioned, it can affect the prognosis, or how this is going to unfold over time, and or how challenging it's going to be to move into the training and make progress, because you have to also address all of those other things and have them under control so your dog can succeed. And the same goes with health problems. Health problems are very underdiagnosed in a way when we're dealing with behavior. So it's very typical to jump into thinking that a problem is due to behavior when we see a change of behavior, without really addressing the part of health. And I have seen many, many, many dogs who suffer from separation anxiety or not, that are also experiencing health issues. And that is either making it look like separation anxiety, or is making the separation anxiety worse, or is affecting the success of the training. So every time you deal with a behavior problem or behavior disorder, those are better words, make sure you go to your vet and you do a full check of your dog, and you make sure that your dog is healthy, even if you have to do blood panels and ask for them for different tests, just to make sure everything is in order before you start working, just so you can set your dog up for success.
So important. Yes. Yes. Yeah. You know what? Almost everything is making sure health first, right? Like, it's just not fair if your dog's got something going on and you're not even acknowledging it. And and I do, and they would believe that they're trying to tell you, like, if there is something wrong, they're wanting to let you know, and their comfort and safety and feeling good is so important.
And the problem with health and dogs is that dogs mask pain very well, and there's actually a higher threshold in terms of pain, in terms of tolerance to different health problems in terms of compared with humans. And so sometimes it's hard to tell that the dog has a chronic issue, health issue, pain, because they have adapted to it somehow. But imagine for a second if you had a chronic headache and you have been able to kind of tolerate it and live your life with that headache, but it probably adds fuel to that tank, right? That big tank of anxiety or stress, that's the better word, that you start feeling every day, filling up. And so if you're constantly feeling bad every single day, it's going to take less to trigger you, right? In all sort of ways, you're going to be much more irritable, right? In every aspect of your life. So many dogs who are dealing with a behavioral disorder such as separation anxiety are also dealing with this, which is affecting them, right? It's affecting the way that they can handle the situation, learn what you're trying to teach them. So it is important to consider that aspect that we usually left behind so we can be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, and it is, dogs are very complicated, but they're, it is just taking the time and learning and recognizing and being aware that separation anxiety isn't always separation anxiety.
Yes.
Assessing the
Exactly.
dog, and things can be planned even before there's before anything bad happens. You can start seeing how your dog is when you leave. And I love that Zoom idea.
Yeah,
That's a great
exactly.
idea.
And that's a great idea to even dogs who, if you run an assessment and you find out that your dog relaxes when alone, or it seems to be okay, so it's not worth, pursuing the road of let's do separation anxiety training, because it seems that your dog is doing well, but it's the first time you're leaving him alone. So you have been with your dog since COVID, with your dog at home all the time. A cool thing and a nice idea to implement is to get a camera and just monitor him while you do gradual absences. So you start leaving every day for short periods of time, not for the amount of time that you will need when you come back to work. You can start slowly. So you can start, if all of this considering that your dog did well in the assessment. So not a dog with separation anxiety. Just a disclaimer, if the dog suffers from separation anxiety, don't do this, just seek for professional help. But if your dog seems to do okay, start leaving every day. So try to slowly acclimate him to be left alone for short periods of time. And at the same time, monitor, because that will give you a nice idea if things are going in the right direction or if things start to get a little bit muddy. There are tons of inexpensive security cameras that you can use. I have different favorite ones, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be a doggy camera. It can be any security camera. You just buy one inexpensive one. They usually connect to an app on your phone, and you can, it works in the background of your phone. So you can open it and close it as many times as you want during the day. And it will provide you with more information about what is happening. But don't wait until the last time when you have to leave for work for real. Just play around and make sure that your dog is doing well. Now, something I think it's important to mention here at this point is to understand that you can't truly prevent separation anxiety since we don't know the cause, since we are not sure of what causes it. If you don't know the cause of something, you can't prevent it. That's a medical principle, right? So there is no guarantee that whatever you do will actually avoid or, you know, like prevent the separation anxiety from getting triggered. But of course, you can try to do your best to set everything up for success and to see if everything you're doing decreases the likelihood of your dog feeling or getting triggered and you know, like being exposed to something that triggers this predisposition. So a couple of things that are in that line are, for example, starting doing the gradual departures, you know, so gradual absences, that it doesn't become something that is traumatizing, a very big change. Is something that's gradual over time. Making your dog, helping your dog be more flexible in general, slowly, you know, in a friendly manner. If you help your dog to be flexible, to change to different things, to different setups, to different routines, to different situations, you are gonna probably create a dog who is more able to cope with changes over time during his life. And so changes will likely not be as traumatizing as if you had never exposed your dog to that. So that in its turn could help, you know, avoid the triggering of that separation anxiety if the dog has it somehow inside of him. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. I mean, you're very much proving what what I understand is that it's a very deep subject, and that it takes time and actually focusing and looking on what is happening and thinking about the future. So many people that are going to be going back to work and doing it. I love the idea. I mean, I've told that people many times to start, you can start with just little increments and not keeping it always the same routine. For some reason, I know I've just realized that it's good to keep it, to change it around a bit.
Yeah, and to make the dog to be used to different, like, you know, different times of the day, different, you know, outfits that you're gonna wear, just so your dog knows that every time you leave is safe, no matter what time, no matter in which way, it's okay. Now, all of this, of course, again, in the context of not suffering from separation anxiety. If your dog already suffers from separation anxiety, the way that you need to do it is a little bit different. So it won't work if you're exposing your dog to go over threshold. That's the only important thing to keep in mind when you assess your dog.
Well, and if you're not sure, just please get help. Get us, there's ways to look at this and film, video.
Exactly.
I know we thought about that. And in one of the boarding facilities I worked in, she has cameras in all the rooms, and it was fantastic because then you could watch and see. And when I was there and out and taking care of all the other dogs and stuff, there's the app where, like you said, where you can look and see what's going on. And because if it is happening, ideally you want to stop the anxiety, change what's happening right away so that the dog isn't getting put into that situation and they don't like it. It's not a good state for their mind. And I know, I really believe that when they do get into states like that, it can get easier to get in them, right? Like it can get triggered. It seems to sometimes even easier. And it's just such not a good state. They don't want to be there, and just taking that state right out of their life is what is the solution. And every dog is different, and get help with it. I mean, they don't come with the solution. We have to.
They don't come with a manual.
Yeah, I see that very often. There's no manual that came with that dog, and they're just like people. Everyone is unique, and every owner is unique, and if we can help them, look at their dog and look with them and see what's really going on. I mean, you never know, maybe it's not what you think at all.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
you definitely have to consider it's dogs are complex beings, right? And there's a multifactorial concept around them. So it's important to consider the genetics of the dog. It's important to consider the breed of the dog. It's important to consider the experiences that that dog has had, the individual in itself. Like what every individual is different in humans and in dogs and all animals, right? The environment, how much is affecting their physical health. All of those components are gonna have an effect on the dog. And as you mentioned before, if your dog is constantly over threshold and in a state of panic, what starts happening is all sorts of things. The first one is that it's going to diminish the dog's health over time. So it's going to lower the dog's immunity because there is a response, an internal response that's happening all the time. So it is going to have an effect in the dog's health, physically speaking. It is going to inhibit learning, and it's going to have the dog more hypervigilant all the time. And the dog is not only going to be afraid of the situation itself, but also of the memory of the situation. So everything that surrounds that situation, it's going to become a trigger. And that's why we call it anxiety. So it's the fear of being left alone. It's an irrational fear of being left alone, but due to the exposure, it creates a state of anxiety, surrounding the whole getting ready and departure and absence of the guardians. So it is important to cover that or to manage that situation so the dog isn't experiencing that anymore, because that's the only way that you will be able to actually teach that dog to not be afraid anymore. If you're exposing that dog all the time to it, there's not going to be any way for the dog. There's not going to be a way for the dog to understand what you're trying to teach him.
it's awful when you think about it, because they can really panic. I don't necessarily anxiety, separation anxiety, more dealing with fears. I have said, like it would be like pushing me into a haunted house and closing the door and holding it behind me. Like I
See,
would
that's your
just
fear.
lose it, right? I would be like,
Exactly,
okay.
right? And imagine if they do that to you every single day and they expect that at some point it's gonna stop. You're gonna, at some point you'll overcome it just by yourself.
And be happy and
It's
enjoy it.
unlikely, right? Yeah, it's unlikely, right?
It's,
One
and it's
analogy
like,
that I
go ahead,
excuse me,
sorry.
yes. One analogy that I have been loving lately and that I use a lot for the purpose of teaching or understanding better what are the pillars of the training, of the separation anxiety training, being one of them managing absences. So don't exposing the dog to his threshold anymore. So don't leaving the dog alone anymore while you're working on teaching him to be left alone. It sounds weird, but that's it's important to cover that. So the dog is never left alone except when you're doing the training. So you teach him in the right way at a level that he can handle to be left alone calmly. So a lot of people feel like that's undoable. It's impossible. How am I going to manage all the absences? Like, I need to go to work, I have a life. But there are tons of different creative ways that you can do that. And most of the people who have a dog with separation anxiety are already doing it, at least as much as they can. So cover the little spaces here and there that are left is not that hard. But coming back to the analogy, one of the things that I like to say is, let's imagine that you are afraid of drowning. And so you're afraid to go into the water and not be able to touch the bottom. And so I try to teach you, because I love water. So I try to teach you, and I take you to the pool and I tell you, I'll never let go of your hand. So you always have me. So don't worry about it. Don't be scared. I'm holding you. All good. I'm not going to let you go for more than half a second, and then I'm going to catch you again, and it's going to be okay. That's my promise. Don't be afraid. And the person trusts me. You trust me. You say, okay, I'll trust you. And so we start doing that. But once a week, without telling you, without you knowing, when you are not looking, I'm going to throw you into the pool on the deep side, and I'm going to run away. And it's like, you save yourself. What are you going to do about it? Are you likely going to overcome your fear? Or are you always going to be not trusting in the process, and feeling like a little bit like I shouldn't trust you because I never know when you're going to do this to me. It's not coherent, right? I'm telling you to trust me, but then I'm doing things that aren't worth trust.
Yeah, that break that trust. You lose that
Trusting me,
trust.
right? You lose that trust, and on top of that, you're afraid of the situation in itself. So now, how are you going to trust when I'm trying to teach you slowly that it's okay? It's very unlikely. And it's hard to understand when we think of dogs. That's why I love to give analogies about humans, because that is when our brain clicks, and and we start thinking, oh yeah, that's right. That makes sense. So I hope that helps to really picture the situation a little bit better.
I think it does a lot. That was a lot of great analogies, and I agree. We, as humans, we understand things better when it's relating to us, and gives us the opportunity to think about how the dog might feel and what they're going through. And even though they are not the same as humans, there is a lot that can be related so much. And getting that out there and letting dog owners know it, that they can try and to get help for separation anxiety. You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to.
Yeah, there are tons of amazing professionals out there, and we are more and more learning that teamwork is amazing. So you can find help in groups of help that can help you from the vet behaviorist, your regular vet, your vet behaviorist, your dog trainer that works in different things, different problems that the dog might be experiencing, a dog trainer or behavior consultant that specializes on separation anxiety. And there are tons of different equations we can create for to be able to help the dog in the best way. So definitely seek for help. They deserve it, right? They're not trying to get away with it, or they're not trying to take any kind of they're not being vengeful. They're not trying to make you pay for leaving them alone. They're suffering, they're having a hard time. And if we are not the advocates for our own dogs, nobody is going to be. So we do have to empathize with them and understand that they're having a hard time, and we're the only ones. They're stuck with us, for good or for bad. They're stuck with us. We decided that they were our dogs. They didn't have that choice. And so the least we can do is to help them feel better and have a healthy and happy life.
And it changes them. It can change them so much. Their whole life can just be amazing with, and like, especially because it does involve trust. I'm sure it does. And when they get in that state, it's just not good. So getting over that and helping them through and growing your bond, right, it's just to make such a difference for
Definitely.
them. And they're waiting.
Definitely.
They're waiting to
They're
do it with
waiting.
you. I like I said,
Yes,
every speaker
definitely.
I've
And
talked, it's they're waiting to connect.
yep, definitely. And something important, I think, to understand is that even when you feel like, oh my God, this is gonna take me, you know, 1 year, 2 years, so much. It's just so much. I can't picture it. I can't do this for so long. Like, is it worth it? If you think about it, if you just adopted your dog and your dog is 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, even, if you are working with that dog for 2 years, yeah, it sounds like a lot right now, right? But if you think about it, your dog is probably going to live, if he's a healthy dog, he's probably going to live 15, 18 years, 16 years. And so in the big scheme of things, 2 years isn't much. And after those 2 years, your dog is going to be happy alone. He's going to be settled. He's going to maybe not enjoy it, but he's going to be relaxed. Maybe he will actually enjoy it. And you will be able to have a dog who for the rest of his life, for 10 years, for even more, will be relaxed and, and feeling good about it. So I feel like if you put things in perspective, it's totally worth it.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And especially like, and we also mentioned how much decreasing the stress in your own life by doing that, and just having a happy life with your dog and not worrying about when you have to go to the store or if you have to go to work, and it's just get help.
Exactly.
And I really feel the sad that a lot of people, I think, hide things and they're embarrassed or whatever. Instead of getting help, they just keep doing this difficult, whatever they have
And
figured
it's
out is
heartbreaking.
working, ish, you know, it could be way better, and it's
Yeah.
it's helpable.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking for them, you know, and there's no reason to feel embarrassed because you didn't cause anything. We know now, remember, that there is a genetic predisposition, likely there is a genetic predisposition, and that it just got triggered by something in the dog's life. So there's nothing you did. You didn't give your dog too much love. You didn't spoil your dog too much. You didn't create separation anxiety by sleeping with your dog. It didn't happen that way. You didn't do anything wrong. So don't feel embarrassed about it. And on the other hand, like on the opposite to that, feel good because you're taking actions. And now that your dog does have this problem, it's on you, and you can make it a difference. You can help him. You can be an advocate. And that should make you feel proud instead of embarrassed. So that's my message for all of you.
Yeah, and
So
we
that
can
you
only
can
do
live.
as much. We have to know things. We can't do anything until we know. So you're doing as good as you can until you know better.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that saying. I love that quote.
And I think it's important. I thank you so much. I know I didn't think it would be hard to get a lot of great information out of you. I knew I wouldn't even have to worry about questions because you've got such a great system and understanding of not only working with it, but actually, you know, I want to say diagnosing, but actually, you know, knowing what's really happening. And that's where we got to start. And I appreciate
Yeah.
that very much. I'll stop
Thank
recording.
you.
We've done really well. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you for inviting me. It was great to be here.
Yeah, awesome.